So, a big welcome back to our listeners and viewers of the Responsible Edge podcast, brought to you by the Anti-Greenwash Charter. Today, I'm absolutely delighted to be joined by Laura. Laura, thank you so much for giving up some of your time this Tuesday morning. It's great to have you on the show.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Now, Laura, I know that we've got sort of 20 minutes or so to kind of tell your story, if you like, and to give our listeners and viewers like a real sense of your background, your experience, but in particular, kind of looking into, you know, those formative experiences that have really shaped your view of the world and impacted, you know, what you've gone on to do in your brilliant career so far. Through the sort of lens of ethics, you know, corporate responsibility and sustainability. So start wherever you like. I mean, we literally do have guests who go back to like those formative childhood experiences. Others start a little bit later. But yeah, just give our listeners and viewers a sense of you.
So I think I will go back to my formative experiences, maybe. I think it's a really interesting question because often with some distance, you can spot some connections that you maybe hadn't spotted at the time. But I grew up in the north of England, in South Yorkshire, in a coal mining village. And I'd say that I really grew up in the shadow of deindustrialisation. So for those who maybe don't know the history of that period, which was kind of mid-80s, there was something called the miners' strike. And I grew up in a coal mining village, as I said. And you know, at the time in the mid-80s, this was before I was born, but the then Prime Minister, who was Margaret Thatcher at the time, embarked on a really aggressive process of deindustrialisation, which led to the closure of kind of coal mines across the UK. And now as an environmentalist, thinking about the closure of coal mines, I think, well, that's a good thing. However, for the place that I grew up, it had massive knock-on social effects. It caused huge amounts of social and economic devastation that still does reverberate today, because, you know, with the mines, which were the cornerstones of like the cultural identity, the economic heart of the communities, with those gone, really what came in its place was increased inequality, decrease in living standards, increase in kind of poverty. And, you know, at the time, deindustrialization, it did mark progress for some people. So we see at the time the financialization of the economy, at the same time, you know, cuts in a top rate tax brackets, rises in VAT, which shifted responsibility, the tax burden, let's say, from the wealthiest to the poorest. So deindustrialization and that period, which I grew up in the shadow of, marked progress for some, but not everyone. And I think at the time of growing up, I had no idea about this. I was just existing, you know, in my childhood. My dad had been a coal miner. My granddad was a kind of coal man delivering coal. So it was part of our family, let's say. Yeah. But I had no idea about kind of the bigger picture of what was going on. It wasn't until later in life when I started to learn about this stuff that I thought, gosh, and I was really drawn to figuring out how we can create fairer societies and more prosperous futures that are equally distributed. And I think that's ultimately why I got into sustainability.
Laura, that was an absolutely sensational sort of introduction, and there's much to sort of go on to talk about, I know, in terms of your career itself. But I want to ask you some questions. You touched upon it. You briefly mentioned that, you know, you realized as you were growing up that you were an environmentalist. Like, what? Just talk us through that. I mean, what you've described there is very much seeing the social impact of deindustrialization. You've described that beautifully, and I imagine there was almost like a not a conflict as such, but almost like being influenced by these two various, almost polarizing, circumstances. But just touch upon the role of the environment, the role of nature, and your sort of growing realization that was something that was important to you.
Yeah, totally. So I would say that I grew up outdoors. Access to nature, like in South Yorkshire where I grew up, we have Sheffield, we have the Peak District, and I think that kind of connection to nature was always, on a very personal level, was something that I found great joy in. I would say that as well, again, this is with hindsight, you see that access to nature and a kind of safe climate and operating space for people, that environmental destruction, some have again profited from that while others have suffered. So I think they're one and the same. I find it hard to delineate like social and environmental, really. I think it's for me, they're one in the same story.
It was just that sense of unfairness and inequality was the driving experience of you as a young person, kind of being influenced by what was going on in South Yorkshire, with your experience day to day of the impact of the closure of the coal mines. Talk us through what happens next then, Laura, in terms of like higher education, early part of career, like what do you do with that drive and that determination to go into sustainability?
Yes, good question. So my brother and I were like the first people in our family to go on to higher education and to go to university. I went to study English literature and history, which is where in history I start to see the political ramifications of what's happening locally to me, to my family, and also, in kind of much wider society and globally as well. So I went on to study, as I said, English and history. Part of me after graduating really, really wanted to go into academia because I think I just really like reading. I love reading. I love learning. I love formulating, like kind of connecting big, you think about the course of history, like connecting the dots between things is like just a fascinating thing to do. For me at that time, that I just couldn't afford to do it. I'd worked like 2 or 3 jobs to finance my way through my undergraduate, and I was like, I need to go and get a job. So I graduated in 2010, so in 2008, we just had the global financial crisis. So the job market wasn't buoyant for graduates, let's say. I had a humanities degree. So this was not a great combination. And I thought, gosh, what am I going to do? Like, what will I do? And like, how do I get a job? And actually, again, talking about where I grew up, there wasn't great opportunity there. And
Laura, sorry to interrupt you, but where did you study?
I went to Newcastle.
Okay, so
I went further north. Yeah.
Okay.
But the job opportunities were all in London, really. So you went on I can't remember the name of the website. I don't know if it still exists, but it was like milkround.com or something. And looking at where all the jobs and graduate placements were, they were all in cities or in London. So I kind of by necessity had to move here. I still live here now. I kind of thought, what will I do with these skills? Part of my degree was English literature. So I actually was a good writer and a good creative thinker as well. And then I thought, marketing. However, I knew deep down that I just couldn't level just selling stuff to people that they didn't necessarily need. And, had this little bit of fire in my belly about solving inequality, maybe, let's say. I had no idea, it's important to note here, I had no idea that the sustainability space existed at all. So I thought the way I would make impact in my career was going into the non-profit space. So that's what I did.
And fascinating. And I think when people think about 15 years or so down the road, it's amazing to sort of reflect back and think how far things have come. Yeah. I mean, I know we were going to talk about how we often talk about how, we're far behind, but it is amazing sometimes just to think about the growth and development of the sustainability space more broadly. But talk us through. So you've got this fire in your belly about inequality and about wanting to resonate fairness, if you like, throughout everything that you do and the impact that you have. You've acknowledged that you don't want to go and sell things that people don't necessarily need through the vehicle of marketing. Not for profit. Like, who do you join? Why were you attracted to them? Like, what was the experience like for you?
Yeah. So I joined a charity, which is the UK's, I believe, largest children's charity, which was the NSPCC. And I joined as a creative. So I was in their creative team. And I do want to say as well, like, I couldn't be so picky about the job that I took. And I'm so glad I took that job. It was amazing. But it wasn't a case of, I didn't feel personally that I could be picky. I was like, I need to get a job. It kind of needs to be in London because that's where all the jobs are. Who will have me? I could not afford to do an internship or anything like that. So I had to take a paid job. And so that's why I went to I saw the job advertised and I thought, maybe I could do this. And I got it, which was amazing. And it was such a wonderful job where I kind of cut my teeth on working on advocacy campaigns, national level behaviour change campaigns, rebranding children's services, looking at how we can support people during really difficult times in their lives, like children and families who are often, living in potentially poverty, and how do you kind of support families to flourish? And it was really incredible. It was, I think I was there for 2 or 3 years. But then in many ways, I thought it was limited because, charity is often born to remedy an issue versus to solve the structural underpinnings and the inequalities of the issue. So I did think, okay, I need to get a little bit more upstream of this. And that's when I started to look at the role of business in society. And I'd started to meet various different people who were then working in sustainability, and they opened my eyes to this whole field. And that's when I found an organisation called Futera. I don't know do you know Futera?
I personally know of Futera, yes. But if you wouldn't mind giving our listeners and viewers a bit of an overview, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, sure. So Futera is an agency consultancy that specialises in sustainability. And when they started, I think it was around 25 years ago, they were such a trailblazer of this whole field. Worked with some of the world's biggest brands and corporates and non-for-profits on everything to do with sustainable development. So I would say that my time at Futera, when I joined, was where my career in sustainability really started and flourished.
And Laura, and just talking through that, because you brilliantly have sort of taken us through your younger years and not knowing what, not being aware of that there was this sustainability field. Perhaps it was just even, beginning to sort of develop and present itself. But what was that experience like for you of becoming aware of this notion of corporate sustainability? And I almost feel like, I'm putting words in your mouth here, but from all of the timeline of events and working at the NSPCC, etc., and everything that had gone through with your childhood experiences, that it must have been like, I found it. I found my place. Was that the experience for you?
Totally. Yes, totally that. So great words. Thank you. Yes, it was. I just saw it as the most exciting place to be, because I think in this space, it's really about the opportunity to redesign, to remake, to rethink the systems that have unintentionally and in some cases intentionally caused harm. So how can we, rethink business as usual? And that for me was just super exciting, very, very complex, which I love, and also a real creative endeavor. And
I'm going to ask you we're going to go on from Futera and look at what sort of happens next, but I just want to take almost like a 13-year kind of report card from you, if you like, and specifically when we look or we focus on the area of inequality or social inequality within the realm of sustainability. Like, I can just imagine the younger version of you who walked into Futura and was just like blown away and excited and enthused and energized, if you like, by this opportunity to, as you say, change the fundamental systems at play. How have things been over those 13 years since? Like, what would be the report card for you on how you believe things are going from a social inequality perspective and how you are feeling about the work that you're doing?
This is a good question, and I find quite hard. So, how's it going? Not great. I think in terms of social inequality, what we're seeing right now kind of keeps me up at night because we have such increasing wealth inequality. So I don't know if you saw this, but there was a piece of work done by New Economics Foundation and Patriotic Millionaires, which I think it was around the time of Davos, like so a few months back. And they have come up with a concept which is great in terms of the idea is great and the framing is great, called the extreme wealth line. So taking the idea of the extreme poverty line and looking at it in terms of wealth. Let me see if I can recall the numbers, but I think what they say is that around five of the world's richest men hold around 869 billion, which is a number I can't even conceive of in dollars, wealth. Whereas the half of the world's population is living at, around the $6 poverty threshold. So that to me is very, very scary, because with rising inequality, I think what you get is extreme individualism. You get scarcity mindsets. You get community dissolving and dissipating, apathy. And those are not good terrains from which it's not good terrain from which to build a better future for everyone.
And especially, I would just add to that from my point of view, especially when we just need that collective investment, if you like, to resolve some of the problems at play. And so if we were creating a system that just fundamentally doesn't incentivize that, like, what are we doing? Laura, that was absolutely brilliant. I want to press you though on how you feel about the work that you now do, and we'll obviously package in sort of where you're at and what you're doing now, but just the feeling towards the sustainability space, if you like, the agenda from the 2013 or 2012 you to 2025.
Yeah. So I still feel excited. I still think this is the place that I want to, I've made the decision to start my own business now in this space. So I'm definitely invested in it. Yeah. I still feel excited. I feel that maybe the space is like corporate brand sustainability has gone a little bit compliance focused, too compliance focused. Potentially, I think we're missing. Actually, I'm going to take that back. I don't think you can have too much compliance necessarily. I think compliance is awesome and it's a good thing and it's foundational. But what I don't see is space for creativity, and I think you need both. So you need the steadier way, like compliance, like transparency piece, but you also need space to play, to be creative, to be innovative, to have these leaps in transformation that are so desperately needed. We can't compliance our way out of this. So I feel still excited, a little bit nervous about where the space has gotten to, but I think it will. I think this is just a moment in time. And yeah, I do think we need to be putting the people who work in sustainability within business, we need to give them space and opportunity to kind of, to have this like creative energy and ideas.
Here. Now we've had comments about my hearing. I hear people on the show when I just could not agree more. And Laura, I think you absolutely nailed that. I love the notion of, and we're going to talk about it in terms of the article this week, but the notion of giving sustainability professionals the space. I haven't read it described like that. And I think that's such a brilliant term. And I also love you are a podcaster's dream. There's podcast episode titles just coming out of you left, right, and center here. But yeah, we can't compliance our way out of this, I think is absolutely brilliant. Let's though, like we'll give our listeners who are slightly confused, they're like, Charlie, we need to know what happened after Futura. So just, or whilst you're at Futura, just talk us through like what happens from then onwards.
Yeah. So whilst I was at Futura, I had like multiple kind of different roles. The last thing I was doing there was setting up their corporate foundation, which is called Futura Solutions Union, which looks at how can we use the power of culture to accelerate sustainable development. And at the same time, I was also doing a master's. So, you know, when I said I wanted to do a master's, but I couldn't afford to do it. Well, eventually I was like, okay, maybe I can afford to do it now. You know, like 10 years later. So I did a master's in something called the history of ideas whilst I did it part-time whilst I was at Futura, which is essentially, this is the study of how ideas manifest and shape our lived reality. So it sounds quite meta, right? And a bit nebulous, but ultimately it's like, how do ideas shape the way we organize ourselves and how we operate as societies? And at this time, I came across something called scientific management as an idea. So this is in the late 19th and 20th centuries, a new management theory emerged, which is called scientific management. And it's also known as Taylorism as well, because one of the big thinkers in this space was a guy called Frederick Taylor. And he wrote a book called The Principles of Scientific Management in 1911. So he's this mechanical engineer by background. He was looking at how do we improve efficiency and productivity and make work a matter of scientific management. So how do we strip away the humanity of work and make planning and administration of workers and machines, how do we bring them together as kind of one big machine? So that's like a 30-second version of what his thinking was. I don't want to do it a disservice.
Just on that, we will link to various materials for listeners and viewers to find out more. But sorry, carry on, Laura.
Yeah. You also had Max Weber, who's like a German sociologist, again writing in the early 20th century. And his theory of management was bureaucratic. It was called like the bureaucratic theory, which he thought that, or argued that bureaucracy and really strict hierarchies in organizational structures, cultures that are defined by rules, standardized processes, meticulous division of labor, impersonal interactions was the way that you get stuff done in business. So this kind of body or sphere. You also have, another one that you will be aware of is Gantt. Do you use a Gantt chart ever in your work? I do. Gantt was another, thinker in scientific management. So looking at how can we make tasks very neatly defined, owners clearly delineated. And what was interesting is I wasn't just learning about the history of those ideas. I was looking at how they live on today. And when you think about the work that we do and the way that organizations operate, these ideas still exist today. So standardized processes, standard operating procedures, departments and siloed ways of working, performance management. These are all relics of the past that still exist in the way that we work today. So if you just hold that thought, so that's kind of bubbling away in the background when I do my master's. And then I just thought, how we're trying to solve challenges that have never been solved before. And we're using, really outdated ways of working to solve them. So I guess I had a bit of a itch to scratch. So I left my job, which was a massive deal for me. Like getting my job was like, that's about safety, security, a way out, a way to support myself and, and my family. And I was like, I'm just going to take a minute. I'm going to, and just kind of explore this. And, I kind of did some more digging and more research. And I think that I kind of got to the point where I thought, sustainability in many ways is like trying to achieve the impossible. It requires courage, imagination, creativity. It demands that we break down silos, that we chart like new directions and new paths. It's much bigger and more complex than trying to be efficient and productive. So if some of the fundamental bedrocks of which we're organizing work are based on those models and those, I would say, old school, outdated management theories, my question is, how are we going to achieve the impossible? And that's, in a nutshell, why the Now Work is here, which is the business that I started around 2.5 years ago.
Laura, that was absolutely captivating and thrilling in many ways, sort of background to the inspiration behind the Now Work and what you guys have gone on to do in the last couple of years. We've obliterated, as I literally said to you in there before we started talking about you, but it's been fascinating. Just give our listeners, we're obviously linked to all various materials so people can find out a bit more about the specifics of what the Now Work actually does, but just give us a summary of exactly kind of what you guys are doing to sort of support the outcomes that you've just been describing.
Yeah, sure. So we have kind of two sides of the business, but both of which are powered by an incredible talent network of independent sustainability experts. So we now have over 2,000 sustainability experts in our community, ranging from kind of technical folks who do the stuff that I don't know how to do, which is like the nitty gritty of carbon accounting or LCAs. We have scientists, we have creatives, award-winning creatives, art directors, filmmakers, writers. We have sustainability strategists. So we have this beautiful array of skills, and we enable organizations, our clients, to tap into those networks to solve sustainability challenges. So we have two sides of the business. One is a talent matching service where people can tap into that expertise like on demand or in a permanent capacity. And then we have an agency arm as well, where we build teams from our network who are kind of best placed to answer our clients' sustainability challenges. So we kind of describe that agency arm as like your super agile sustainability agency. With a kind of a bench of 2,000 people to tap into. And that part is all overseen and run by us.
Laura, that sounds awesome. I'm sure there's people listening in, to our show that will be very keen to kind of find out more. It seems like the way you described it, it just sounds like such a compelling and such a timely, such a well sort of formulated position, or proposition. Let me ask you one thing just on the Now Work before we move on to the article. You're now working in kind of, talent sort of recruitment, like you're supporting that network, etc. Like, what's that been like for you? Because that's a new sort of area for you, having left Butera. So just talk us through what that sort of people side has been like for you in terms of building the business.
Yeah, it's a really good question. And I think that it's been so enlightening and wonderful and really enriching. I've not always, but at my time at Futera, I was building teams and kind of helping to oversee projects. So, but yeah, you're right in terms of this is a very new foray or a new string to my bow, let's say. And I think that it has been awesome because I just really like learning about people's histories, their experiences, what shapes them, what motivates them, what fires them up. And I think that not having a recruitment background, yet having a business that partly does recruitment has actually been really good. Like we have this like beginner mindset that we're not doing the tried and tested methods, or we really, one of the questions that we ask people when we're kind of trying to connect them is like, what does a dream sustainability or impact brief look like to you? So we're not just looking at years of experience and these like kind of hard metrics. We're looking at what actually gets you out of bed in the morning, what fires you up, what fires you up, how did you come, like many of the questions that you're asking at the start of the show, like, you could do my job.
I don't think I could, but no, okay, I get it. Okay, that's really interesting, and it really encapsulates what you described earlier, which is we've got to think of alternative, innovative ways of resolving some of these issues at play, and you guys are practicing what you preach in that sense and applying that to the work that you guys are doing at the Now Work, which is awesome. As I said, we'll link to all of Now Work's materials in all of our write-ups, etc. Laura, we've brilliantly gone through 30 minutes now of you. I think we're going to call it there, although I know I could ask loads more questions on you. But would you mind now just providing our listeners with an introduction, a bit of a summary to, I think it's, and I always butcher people's names, so apologies for this, but it was Edwin Corver in Roundup from September last year. Again, we'll link to the article itself. But would you mind just providing a bit of an overview, summary, and then just picking out whatever you thought was most interesting kind of points from the piece?
Yeah, of course. I'm glad you took the pronunciation of the name instead of me. So I'm just going to go.
And probably butchered it. So sorry, Edward.
No. Yeah. So looking through the article, it was really interesting. So I guess the central hypothesis is that organizations' traditional hierarchical and legal frameworks often hinder true innovation. So what they've done, and to explain that a little bit more, if you think about corporate decision making right now, it's concentrated at the exec board level. They're legally responsible for the outcomes of decisions. So what Edward's done is created a new model to enable others to contribute ideas without the burden of legal accountability. And they actually suggested something called shared value networks, which is essentially a way for other stakeholders, whether that be, educators, government, citizens, NGOs, whoever, to contribute to solutions. And the idea is that should create space for others to share perspectives and collaborate on solutions. When I read this, I must admit, on first read, I kind of was reading this. I was like, is this not just an advisory board? But no, it's not. What they've done is kind of played with the original concept of the advisory board. Mm-hmm. And, even now an advisory board is at the center of power. And what they're suggesting is that shared value networks should operate at the edge of the organization. And a couple of things that I thought were really interesting were that participants can belong to multiple networks, and what that should do in theory. Each network again would have its own goals and priorities. But in theory, what this should do is create a web of interconnections and the sharing of ideas. So I loved it in terms of creating networks that can participate in open communities, collective intelligence, building upon, multiple different ideas, which I think, and sharing knowledge more openly. So, yeah, when you think about the current paradigm of the way that businesses operate, this is a kind of a new model that tries to reshape that.
And Laura, by the way, you've absolutely nailed that. Again, we'll provide links to things so people can check out the full article, but Laura's provided a brilliant summary there. Just for my benefit, like you've described, are there any examples that you've come across with organizations that, you've worked with, et cetera, or worked within that you think have adopted something akin to this SVN shared value network kind of principle?
I think there are attempts at it for sure. So sustainability advisory councils, for example, it kind of reminded me of that, where you would bring in multiple different perspectives. Whereas I think that the slight issue with those advisory councils is potentially that it just, if you've got a sparkling LinkedIn and a personal brand and people know you, it's easier to kind of get access to those, where maybe they don't do enough digging to find perspectives that are, that are maybe a little bit harder to find. I think there are some businesses, Yux Net-a-Porter is one that has a sustainability advisory. I mean, many businesses have them. A good kind of actually a member of our talent network, Richard Johnson, he used to work at DAME, which is the Sustainable Period Care startup / scale up. And they were looking at how you get young women and girls into how do we reflect their ideas and perspectives into decision making. But I don't think there are a huge amount, if I'm honest. And actually, it was interesting that this is a theoretical model. It's not in practice necessarily, from what I can see. So I think, to me, this really, the big takeout that I had from reading this is like, we need shiny, we need shining examples of new ways of doing things. Like, where is the skunk works for sustainability? I don't see it. In terms of interesting governance, I think faith in nature, bringing nature into their board. House of Hackney, which is a business based in London, Hackney, as the name suggests. They are bringing, I think they've done it. They brought nature onto their board. So they learned from what faith in nature have done. And are doing that. So yeah, there are some pockets, but not enough.
And how does it work? Like, I'm going to play devil's advocate with this. Okay. I'm just going to throw, because this is the whole idea for the responsible edge is that we don't just, we try and get to the core of like the difficult point related to this. The elephant in the room is this just like corporate idealism wrapped up into a good news story that we can share, that we are producing these voices from different parts of the organization, engaging with different stakeholders out externally from the organization in order to present ourselves in such a way. But at the core and the heart of, as you've alluded to, the vast majority of business structures and models, we have, a C-suite that is ultimately empowered by their shareholders to try and maximize profit. And therefore, regardless of this nice to have stuff that's going on, ultimately nothing's really going to change until that fundamental structure changes. Like, what would be your response to that position?
It's a very depressing position.
Sorry. I brought the tone down. Sorry, Laura.
/ realistic, right? I don't wholly disagree with you in that. This is the current paradigm, the way things are done. It is very, very hard to change the way things are done, right? So it is hard, but it's not impossible. And I think we should do this work because it's hard. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it. So I would just say we need to raise our level of ambition versus just accept that, okay, that's just the way things are and you can't change it. You can change things. Businesses are part of society. Like, part of studying history for me has been like really comforting, in that I see, if you look at the grand array of history, it's full of transformation, full of it. So I do think it is about level of ambition, for one. On the kind of very concrete point that you make around, okay, well, if it's got a C-suite and that's it. I think that we need to bring humanity into our work, because even if you're a member of a C-suite, you're still a person. You can still be influenced by ideas. You can still be inspired. So I think that that's why, we shouldn't see organizations as this kind of robotic, technical, bureaucratic thing. Like, if you're a CEO, you're a person. If you're a chief sustainability officer or CFO, you're a person who has the ability to change things. So I still do think that these, like, as in this model, the shared value network model that's been presented, we need to think through actually in the governance how you make the ideas a reality, but it's not impossible, surely.
And Laura, I think you're absolutely right. And I think actually one of the things is for me, there needs to be like a slight pragmatism at the heart of this. Yeah. Like, the SVNs from reading the article, for me, it seems like, they talked about the relationships that organizations might build with like NGOs and government organizations and community groups outside of their organizations as part of the SVNs that they're looking to develop. Well, that to me just looks like a massive opportunity to build relationship, to build opportunity from a, cross-promotional point of view, or a sharing of data, or some sort of joint lobbying for opportunity, or whatever. There's so many opportunities that will, like, traditional commercial opportunities that will rise from that type of engagement. So from my point of view, like, it was like, okay, let's just take the sort of nice to have, the way that it can be viewed, the softly that we can sort of position ourselves with, and actually think about the really strong commercial outcomes that can be realized if we as organizations open our doors a little bit and open our horizons a little bit. And I think, and again, I want to get your take on this. I think the article alluded to this notion of an impact coordinator who, as you said, like, operates across multiple SVNs within an organization, but is ultimately in charge of, like, the overall kind of SVN architecture, if you like, of the organization. That I read and I thought, that's an awesome role. Like, that is a great idea for organizations that are of a certain size to be able to sort of have this visionary view of how they engage with external stakeholders. What was your take on that notion of kind of impact coordinator?
That was great. I agree with you. Here. I get, what a great job. I agree. And I think it does need, what I thought was interesting about this is that when you think about the opposite of like this kind of organic way of working, organic can still be designed. So it can still be designed. It can be very thoughtfully and intentionally designed. And that's what I, from the impact coordinator role that they suggest would be needed to help, enable all these SVNs to participate and kind of share knowledge. That is really about design and actually thinking through, just because it's not anarchic in that way. It's kind of still thoughtfully designed, but organic, and ideas are allowed to spread. So, yeah.
And crucially, and I think one of these really beautiful themes throughout this conversation today has been this notion of space. And an SVN is the clearest kind of manifestation of an organization going, we want to create the space for our people and for our external stakeholders in order to be able to create influential pathways and things that we can do in order to have positive impact across a sort of a range of different metrics. So I think, like, that's, again, it rings so true to your message of we're not going to compliance our way through these problems. We need to look externally. We need to look above the parapet, and we need to find a way to create the environments in which innovation really occurs. And that's what I guess SVNs are there to try and do. What was your sorry, you've got me, Laura, you've got me impassioned by this stuff during this conversation. I've found it really interesting. I'm going to butcher this, but I've just got my notes here. I think it talks about the notion, or the concept of concentricity. Just touch on that within this sort of context, if you like, of SVNs.
Is that in the kind of the move? Do you mean like the movement from center to edge of power?
I believe so. Yes, that's what the article was sort of touching on.
Yeah, I think it is interesting in that way, and kind of goes against the Max Weber notion of strict hierarchies and bureaucracy is how you do things. Strict hierarchies and bureaucracy is how you make things more productive and efficient. I don't necessarily disagree with that. Everyone stays in line. Everyone kind of sticks to their thing, their skills. However, what this idea of concentricity is that we need to blow that open. And actually, if we need, which we do, we can't compliance our way out of this. We need space. We need creative thinking. We need energy and dynamism. Like, everyone towing the line and like sticking to what they know is just not the way forward. So I wholeheartedly believe that idea of operating on the edge and actually bringing all these like web of ideas together it sounds quite nebulous, but I think the way that you put it is good. Like that can have a concrete, tangible outcome. And at Climate Week New York, the one just gone, we held a kind of private roundtable for chief sustainability officers that came across from all different industries, from kind of fashion, tech, banking and finance. And everyone at the time was like, it was a really fascinating conversation. And people on the whole said that they didn't get into this work to just report and to be, to do compliance. They got into this work because they were fired up. They're creative people. They want to make an impact. And I think that they said time and space for creativity is crucial versus getting drowned in kind of compliance and reporting. Not that that's not important. I do want to say, like, I kind of want to, like, I'm not sitting on the fence there, but I do think it's a crucial aspect of the work. But and that's where these shared value networks or something like this, that's where you get ideas. Like that's how I want to know what people think or what they're feeling or how we could serve this community better as a business. That's a business opportunity, right? And it's also an opportunity to make an impact. So actually, and in many ways, that's what the Now work is kind of here for. You often, in sustainability teams, or if you take a mid-size kind of, let's say, private equity-backed business that's earning 100 million plus in revenue, or or turning over that, they might have a sustainability department of one. One person cannot possibly do all of that work. And I think that that's what the Now work is there for. It's like, okay, we're your team of 2,000 sustainability people. You can tap into them when needed. You can bring them into your team more permanently. But I think the role of sustainability, the function of sustainability in business, is evolving and changing so rapidly that you can't ever have. It's really impossible. I think quite impossible to have all of the skills needed in the business. You need to look outside, and that's why these shared value networks are a great concept.
And align perfectly, as you quite rightly alluded to, with what you guys at the Now work are trying to offer and facilitate, is that opportunity to bring in that sort of additional stakeholder group, if you like, to support with an SVN, which I think is brilliant. Let me ask you, I think I want to make a point, and then I want to ask you final question. I think you've absolutely killed that in terms of talking about the CSO roundtable that you had and sharing that insight on creativity and innovation. I think we've got a one thing we need to think about. That's one thing, talking about the most senior people working in sustainability at the moment. We need to think about the next generation of people that are coming in sustainability now. If we're just going to have a load of accountants and data people that are going to come in, because that's what the requirement of the role looks like, we're going to be in an absolute shocker when we turn around and go, wait, where's all the innovative, creative ideas that we need in order to actually, shift things and move things in a more positive direction? So I think we have to be very, very careful of the impact that going down too much down the compliance route. Although, as you say, compliance is very important. We need to have that baseline. But just making sure that we don't lose sight of the recruitment of the next generation of people working in the space. But Laura, let me ask you this. So if I was to, and again, this is a very difficult question to answer, but it kind of draws us towards the magic wand question as well. Like, what do you think, taking in like what the article alludes to, like what does the ideal organizational structure look like to you for the future, for the companies of the future? Like, what will they look like from an organizational structure perspective?
That is a big question. And I would say, one of the kind of pieces of research that I did when I looked into, before Hannah and I established the Now work, was looking at different models and ways of working that are happening. And really interestingly, so there was a study done by the Harvard Business School on talent access. And what that study found is that CEOs, they surveyed, like, I can't remember how many companies, but it was kind of big companies and lots of them. Sorry, we'll put the link in the in the reference and the source in the thing. But they said that it was around 2/3 of those CEOs said they increasingly expect to rent, borrow, or share talent. Okay, so actually this kind of notion of, and I think we're seeing this play out, I think there are big social implications of this, don't get me wrong, this isn't just an all kind of rosy story, but the flexibility of labour is like increasing. And in knowledge workers, that segment of the economy, they are moving around businesses quite quickly. Many of them are like deciding, I don't want a full-time job. I want to work independently, which is why we've got such a big talent network, is that people want to use their knowledge and skills for specific briefs or projects versus like, I just want to work at this company for the rest of my life. So in terms of organizational structures, what that might mean is I think that you will have kind of core skills. But I think there will be a blend. What does the future corporation look like? A blending of those skills. So I think teams that work on projects together versus the sustainability team does their thing, the marketing team does their thing, the finance department. I think you will see, I think we can take that concept into the organization for sure, of like, how do these teams work together versus really clearly delineated, which we've said is a relic of the past. And I think what we'll see is more access to this increasingly flexible, mobile talent, knowledge workers. They're actually tapping into to knowledge and expertise and perspectives when it's needed.
Sorry, Laura, I cut you off.
No, go.
Well, I was just going to say, and then what's fascinating with what you've just described there is to come full circle back to your study and what you've learned is that ultimately that will create a more efficient way of working anyway. So we're going to do away with the old that we were promised was the future of efficiency within the corporate setting, and we're going to implement the new, which is facilitated by the interconnected digital nature of modern life and the fact that we're able to work in this more agile way, more flexible way you've just described. That is a brilliant place to finish on, Laura. Thank you so much for gently nurturing me through the nature of organizational structures and processes. It was super interesting. Let's conclude now with the magic wand question. So, Laura, if I was to hand you a magic wand, you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant. What would that one thing be?
I think that, again, going back to the thing that keeps me up at night is rising wealth inequality. Mm-hmm. I think this is it's an economic issue. It's for governments, NGOs, citizens, but it is for business to look at as well. And right now, I don't see anyone in the commercial world necessarily. I would love to be proven wrong there. That's looking at that with any degree of seriousness. But as I said, I don't think we build a movement for a better world and a society when we have such vast inequality that causes polarization, apathy, and hyper-individualism. So I think that my magic one would be for businesses to start to look at this, to think about social mobility more robustly.
You're going to get a hear here. I think that's a brilliant suggestion. I am really curious to look myself, and I bow to your judgment on this, whether that there isn't any, that no one is looking at this issue. That seems wild that we've not got anybody out there. But hopefully somebody's listening into this and being inspired by Laura's brilliant representation of the issue in the early part of our conversation and is inspired to take up the good fight. Laura, that was absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It's been great to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks so much for having me.
And that's it for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big, big thank you to Laura Hunter, founder and CEO of The Now Work, for joining us and sharing our insights into how we can rethink organizational structures for greater collaboration, shared value, and impact. Today, we explored the emerging concept of shared value networks, how they challenge traditional hierarchies, foster stakeholder alignment, and unlock new ways for businesses to partner beyond legal limitations. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by the Anti-Greenwash Charter, championing responsible sustainability communications. Visit antigreenwashcharter.com to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.